industrial organizational psychology. And when I found that topic, I found what I was really meant to do. I wanted to study how humans interact in communication and in work.
Who is this book for?
The audience continues to expand. I thought I was writing it for, I would have said, adults 20 to 100 years old. I can't think of any aspect of life that doesn't improve when you work on improving your communication skills.
You are listening to the NEI Pioneer Podcast, where we showcase and share the authentic stories of Northeast Indiana. The best way that you can be supporting us is to like these videos, share our episodes, and follow or subscribe to our podcast. We appreciate your support in helping us tell these important stories in our region. Today, Callie and I got to sit down and have a great conversation with Michelle Gladieux. Michelle is the founder of Gladieux Consulting and the author of Communicate with Courage. She specializes in communication, executive coaching, team training, keynote speaking, writing, and the list continues. She is a talented individual who is passionate about her work and this region. In this conversation, we discuss the process of writing a book for the first time, what pro moves are, and how to use your communication to make a difference. No matter which stage of your career you're in or whatever life stage you're in, everyone can benefit from what Michelle has to teach about communication. So basically, if you do any communicating throughout the day, which everyone does, then this episode is for you. So let's get into it. Hello and welcome back to the NEI Pioneer Podcast. We are so excited that you're here for this conversation. Today, I'm one of your hosts, Hannah Hanagan, and I am joined by
Callie Herring.
And today, we are excited to welcome our guest, Michelle Gladieux. She is the founder of Gladieux Consulting, as well as the author of Communicate with Courage. So we are super excited to have her on here, and welcome to the podcast, Michelle.
Oh my gosh, I'm really grateful to be here, and I have been a fan of the podcast since you started
That's
making
amazing.
it.
We love that.
It's quality podcast, really good stuff.
Yes, thank you so much.
That's so good to hear.
So just for our guests, we've talked a little bit, but if you wouldn't mind just telling us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Sure. The tell me about yourself question is the hardest interview question.
It's broad, I know.
Known to mankind. So let's see. This is NEI. So let's start with I am born and raised in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and I went to Purdue University, West Lafayette when I was 17, and I stayed there for 6 years to work on undergraduate and graduate studies, got a master's in technology with an emphasis in industrial organizational psychology. And when I found that topic, I found what I was really meant to do. I wanted to study how humans interact in communication and in work and help folks just do better at that, because how we do at that really impacts our personal lives so much as well. Raised in a family with mom, dad, 2 big brothers. I think it really helped having brothers who were 7 and 14 years older than me, because as I walked into boardrooms and got myself into management consulting and teaching situations as a young woman in her 20s, beginning then, I wasn't really intimidated by no matter what the makeup of the room was. And I continue to believe that we're all equally valuable as humans. We all have our strengths and weaknesses as communicators, but everybody deserves an opportunity to learn and grow. So, everyone else I think that you've had on the podcast would also agree that we're all standing on someone else's shoulders. I'm standing on a lot of people's shoulders and a lot of great opportunities to get to where I am, and I still have so much farther to go.
Since we've brought up your book, kind of what was your journey into becoming an author, and what kind of inspired this book?
Well, I've always loved to write, and I have been writing chapters for books, articles, coaches' corners, creating workbooks for all kinds of different teams and companies. And those folks had been saying, for 10 or 20 years, do you have a book? And that question, as I started to speak on larger stages and offer workshops in more states around the country and in different countries also, I was tired of saying, no, I don't have a book. It didn't seem like a smart marketing thing to do either. If you're being asked for a product, look into it. So, but I also believe very strongly in listening to my intuition and trusting the timing in life. And it didn't feel right until about 5 years ago. And then I decided, and once I decide, it's on, like most probably type A type individuals, it's on. So I started writing it on nights and weekends, and I had one of my coworkers hold me accountable, and he's one of our project managers, Tim. So we had weekly or biweekly meetings where I would tell him to give me a deadline, and then we'll review chapter 1, etc. So I worked on it for about 4 years before we sent it as a complete manuscript to our first choice publisher, and we had a list of about 50 that we respected, that we were going to try to get interested in the book. But the first one looked at it and said, "We think it's great, and we'd like you to rewrite some parts of it, and we're interested." And that was Barrett Kaler Publishers out of Oakland, California, and they're distributed, lucky for me, by Penguin Random House, the world's largest book distributor.
Yeah.
So they're standing behind it.
Amazing.
That is amazing. That is a big accomplishment, especially for like your first, book and like material. That's a great accomplishment.
And maybe my last, Hannah. That's another question that comes up. What's your next book about? Like, this book it's a baby. It's only a year and a half.
Yeah.
It's a toddler. I'm going to raise this book before I write any other
Yeah.
books. But I will tell you, the interviews, the podcasts, the things that come along with writing a book are sort of like market research, and they are informing perhaps later what I might want to write about next.
Yeah.
But for now, Communicate with Courage is all of my best pro moves distilled, or advice I would give to people about making pro moves as communicators, distilled into a pretty short paperback. I think it comes in, I should know, but I think it comes in around 150 pages.
Yeah.
The goal was, picture getting on a plane in Boston and you have to fly to LA, and you're going to have the book done by the time you get there, and hopefully with a lot of scribbling in the margins.
Yeah.
So it makes my day when people hold up their book and they'll say, like, "Look," and there's 20 Post-it notes and things like that. Like,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, all those nights and weekends alone and as an extrovert, lonely in my office writing. Yay, someone's read it. And
Yeah.
we're very happy that it's received 11 literary awards in its first year of publication. So that was something else I learned, is when you write a book, you can submit it to be sort of juried and looked at. And the first award came in, and my team and I party. We're like, "Oh my God, I got an award." And then we got a few more coming in. It's like, oh my gosh, this might, and you're of course helping by letting me come talk a little bit about it.
Yeah.
So thank you. And I'm hoping to kind of make just another name, another way that Fort Wayne, Indiana and Northeast
Yes.
Indiana has impacted the rest of the world. I really hope to represent Northeast Indiana through this book as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, that is one of the goals of our podcast, is showcasing the people of the region that make the region as great as it is. Because without that, we have numbers and statistics, but that doesn't necessarily give you a good view into that region. It's really the people and the stories and what they've accomplished here. So we appreciate you coming on here
Sure.
and sharing this journey and who you are as part of that initiative. And I was going to add on to what you were saying about people asking for like a second book. I mean, a lot of this like information is like a mix of personal stories and personal experience that you've learned. And it's like, I can't just manufacture, a whole nother set of experience. You kind of have to live that, And it's very obvious in this book that you have lived a lot of these experiences and the pro moves that you've been talking about. Where did that like word come from and that meaning? And
May I read from the book on that?
yes,
Okay.
go for it.
Story time.
Pro moves. Keep your eyes peeled for pro moves. This is from the introduction, before chapter 1, page 5. Keep your eyes peeled for pro moves. You'll see them sprinkled throughout the book, with time-tested favorites concluding each chapter. A pro move is a communication attempt, a way to send or receive messages more deftly than the average bear. It's a good try that might flop, or that you might pull off with flying colors. Either way is okay. A pro move is a communication strategy that others might see as involving too much trouble or skill to undertake, so they walk on by, missing a chance to get closer to their communication potential. Making a pro move requires passion for learning and a desire to improve your life, your surroundings, or someone else's life. It often means you'll use self and other knowledge in the action you're taking or deciding not to take. For example, you know your preference when communicating is to do or say X, but you read a situation to call for Y. So you zig when you used to zag. Maybe you stand out, stand up, or stand down, but it's not the easy choice for you. What is it then? It's the pro move. So it's a combination of bravery and skill, and also caring enough about how you're perceived and how others are getting by in the world that you're willing to use your power of one person to try to make a difference. And it could be a text, an email, a speech, a question, saying I love you, saying I'm sorry, saying we should talk about this, there's tension between us, I'd like it to be better. The stuff that makes people feel afraid. Because beyond that, once you face that fear, self-esteem grows and life is better, happier, more successful.
Yeah.
I can't think of any aspect of life that doesn't improve when you work on improving your communication skills.
Yeah. And I think something that I really appreciate reading through this book, and even in the language of like pro moves, is it's not pro results or like pro outcomes. Like even in the description that you were talking about, it's making that decision, putting yourself out there, doing maybe a harder thing, and then being okay with whatever that result is, knowing you did what you were supposed to do.
I'm so grateful for every failure that I've had as a communicator, and it really helps as you get older and you can then impact more lives because you can store up your failures and what you've learned from them. And when someone comes to you to say, I bombed the speech, or I didn't get the raise, or I hurt this person's feelings, you've been there and you can say, it's not maybe the exact same situation, but I have felt something like that. So it's always useful. We can always recycle our failures into something useful.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it.
And something I just wanted to kind of tack on to a couple of things we've already talked about. But we've spoken about how the book feels like pretty personal to you. You're telling personal stories, personal failures, personal successes, things like that. Is it, I don't know, was there any points that you almost felt either offended
naked
or a little like or like exposed and stuff, and you're putting this book out there, but even in those like first initial like, here's my book, and then the publisher sends back some edits kind of things like, hey, we would like you to rewrite this or whatever, was there any points that you were like, oh, I don't want to part with like this certain way that I worded
that's such
the
a good
book
question.
or anything like that?
So I did feel vulnerable because my whole life I've been a researcher and a teacher of topics related to leadership, communication, conflict management, writing and presenting, things like that. And this time was my first time really going into and putting in writing for the record some of the toughest things I've lived through. And I did cry sometimes as I was writing, but I also laughed sometimes while I was writing. And now as I do book keynotes and workshops, what do you know? I'm looking out at audience members and I'm seeing, even some tough guys out there, maybe getting a little misty, and I'm hearing laughter. So we know that I think it was worth it because it creates emotional resonance, and that's where learning occurs best, is when someone is laughing or they feel something deeply. As far as negotiating with the publisher, I thought that I became a better writer in the 1,000,005 edits that went back and forth between all of us, and that's why I'm glad that I did decide to go the traditional publishing route. I held my ground on many things. I held my ground on the cover, how I wanted the cover to look. And I know that they were thinking I was a pain in the butt. And they didn't say those words, but you read between the lines and you can tell, right? And they came back to me with things like, you have this sentence in capital letters. We're changing it. And I write back and say, we can't change that. That's the story about being at the funeral home when my brother passed away suddenly. He was 27 and I was 19, and it was a heart arrhythmia. And completely unexpected, tall, 6'4", strong biker dude, also worked for Indiana, Michigan on the power lines. And that I wrote about how that funeral home was filled with his biker buddies, and one of them came up to me, and we're all dressed up. This was pre-pandemic, obviously, if I was 19. And we're all dressed up, and it was a pretty quiet affair, and everything was just so. And one guy walked over to me, and I remember he had an American flag bandana on his head, the full leather deal, the chain with the wallet, all of that. And he just came up to me and said, now, don't you worry, little Shelley. Your brother's got his knees in the breeze in Harley heaven, and he's up there riding strong. And like the whole place just went, whoa, and just stared like, oh, how inappropriate. My point in the book was that probably took him 60 seconds and maybe 30 seconds to think about, do I want to go over and say hi to the little sis or not? And it helped heal my broken heart. So yes, I want that sentence in capital letters, and we're keeping it that way. So we did go back and forth on some things, but I have no qualms about it. It's truly from my heart. So I guess the moral of the story there is choose a few things you're going to stand for. Always be open to feedback, because I made tons and tons of little changes throughout the book to make it better. But certain things I wasn't going to budge on, and I wanted to exercise my rights. And sometimes in communication, you have to kind of feel out, where are those boundaries and rights?
Yeah.
And if we approach communication with both assertiveness and courage and diplomacy and openness to feedback, that's a recipe that's hard to beat.
Yeah.
I would love to talk about the book cover.
Okay.
You mentioned that was one thing you didn't really budge on.
No.
So I would love you to talk about the creation of the cover.
The book cover is a small sailboat on a stormy sea, and there are 4 waves that it is trying to navigate. And that is how I see every human life. I think we all have 4 hidden challenges in communication to navigate, and I write about them, and each chapter of the book is short, but 4 of the chapters of the book are about each of these hidden challenges, including like defining to be right. You're so darn sure all the time, or hiding from risk. You're afraid to be seen, etc. The design on the sailboat is a wink to my mom. My parents are deceased, but she was an amazing lady. They were both amazing people, but she was an amazing lady, Michelle Gladieux, in that she did these kinds of things where I came home one day and there is a sunfish sailboat in the front yard. And I'm thinking, nobody here sails. What's up with the sailboat in the front yard? And she says, oh, I saw that for sale on the side of the road at somebody's house. And I've decided, well, that was a good price. I'm just going to learn to sell it. Knowing her, she's a negotiator also. She probably talked him down. And then she proceeded to decide to learn how to sail. And she's probably in her 60s. She did things like that. She modeled for me, it's okay to be courageous. And life isn't over at any decade. And well into her 60s, she was parasailing on vacation and things I wouldn't have the courage to do. But yeah, we definitely lost her too young. I was 19, also when my mom passed away, and she was 67. And I remember thinking at the time, well, you know, that's pretty old. And then every year goes by and you're like, oh my gosh, that's right around the corner. But she had me later in life. She was almost 50 when she gave birth to me. And she often had talks with me about, for example, Michelle, I'm not going to be here maybe as long as some of your best friends' parents. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to tell you all the secrets that I have found in life for taking care of yourself and others and communicating effectively. And she was just a great role model. So the book is, of course, dedicated to her.
Wow.
That's
amazing. That's her sailboat.
That's amazing.
Who is this book for?
That's a great question. The audience continues to expand. I thought I was writing it for, I would have said adults, you know, maybe 20 and up, 20 to 100 years old, because it is such a universal experience in life that we have personal and professional relationships, and they all matter. But then I went to Carroll High School a couple weeks ago and presented to their entrepreneurship classes who had all read the book, and they had amazing questions. So that was a challenge for me because when I was writing it, I wasn't thinking 16-year-olds would read it. On the drive there, I'm like, okay, always analyze your audience before you speak or teach. Let's see, what was I doing at 16? And I told them, hey, young people, at 16, I was in love with my first boyfriend. And we would sometimes fight. And when we fought, an interesting thing that I noticed was I was doing and saying things that my parents did and said when they fought. So I want to just tell you, and at this point, the principal of Carroll walks in the room, and he stands in the back, and I'm thinking, well, okay, I'm going to say it anyway. I said, the adults around you, you might not have access to many role models. Everyone's probably doing their best. But as you encounter dysfunction in your families and schools and social settings, know that you don't have to replicate what you've seen. Mm-hmm. And that the world is going to expand with the more relationships you make, and you're going to have more options. Mm-hmm. So I went in just trying to remember what it feels like to be 16 and 17 and 15. And then one young lady came up to me on the break, and she was very nervous, and she had tears in her eyes, and she was kind of holding the book, and she said, my best friend and I had a big fight, and reading about how to handle conflict really helped us, and we're friends again. And I said, that's great. Can I ask you 2 quick questions? Because I don't want to be too nosy. And she said, sure. And I said, in general, what was the conflict about? And she said, one of the wars that the United States is involved in. And I said, and then my second question is, what was the medium of communication? Did you meet and talk? Were you on the phone? Did you text? And she said, we texted all the way through it. And that's different than when I was 16, when we weren't texting. Right. I was in trouble all the time for being on the phone to like, no phone calls after 9 p.m. And I like sneak the cord under the door. Like, I have to be quiet because my mom and dad will know. But she texted through a conflict, and it made me happy. So I think we can go with high school to 100 or 110 years old.
That's awesome. And I'm sure it's really encouraging to see that kind of have an impact on a wider audience than you had intended it for. And even that age group having a resource like this, where maybe they haven't encountered the exact same hurdles as an adult in maybe a work setting or in a whatever setting it is, but being able to read through this and kind of prepare on the front end for that. And then again,
and
using
make a
it in your
difference
personal
as an individual. They're going to have loss. They're going to get their heart broken. This we can say for sure.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Speaking of which, when I broke up with that boy, I remember crying and sitting on my bed, and my mom came in, and this was her helpful advice. She put her hand on my knee and said, Michelle, I know this hurts a lot right now, but this is probably going to happen 7 or 8 more times in your life.
Thanks, Mom.
I don't feel better at all. I'm going to die of heartbreak,
Yeah, 7 times
but
now.
that was an accurate, there have been breakups. And I do have a paragraph or two in the book apologizing for being the girlfriend that I was sometimes, because I didn't know that you can't talk about a relationship issue for hours and expect the other person to be able to hang in there just because you are destined for a career in communication, coaching, and analyzing communication. And I didn't know that. And I would get so mad when guys would be checking out after, half an hour.
Not as,
we have barely covered these topics. And then I realized, professional counselors, went to school with a lot of people also getting degrees in psychology. I was organizational psych. They were going clinical psych. And talking with professional counselors and people studying it, well, they have appointments that are 50 minutes, and then they kick you out of their office. And there's a reason for that. I learned that most humans cannot analyze a conflict or a difficult situation involving feelings for more than 50 minutes. So I still have to keep adjusting the way I interact, and I have so far to go to be a really great communicator. But the thing I do know now is where my weaknesses are, and I can still love myself despite them. And that's huge. And that's what we try to do with training audiences and coaching clients, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. Which a note maybe just on your upbringing and when you were younger, there was a specific note in the book that I just think is so funny, that you received a note, or your parents had received a note from your preschool that read, "Today, Michelle observed a schoolmate misbehaving and suggested that we take a different approach." Which is just a funny little story about how it was kind of a nod to what you would be doing later. So with that, when did you know that you kind of wanted to be a teacher coach? Like, what was that journey like?
In high school, I was really digging being business club president, and I was also thankfully taking some early credit classes at Purdue Fort Wayne in psychology. So I could do that as a senior. So I was like, ooh, I love business. I love psychology. I'll have to choose one. And then I went to Purdue, and luck of the draw, got a counselor that listened to the young 17-year-old kid and listened to what I had to say. And he said, have you ever heard of organizational psychology? And I said, no, what's that? The study of human behavior in the workplace.
That's it.
Ding, that's it. And I also kind of felt at age 4 that teacher wasn't. I remember the kid, David.
David, if you're watching this podcast,
I felt that David needed something they weren't providing.
Yeah.
One of the best compliments I've ever received came after a podcast interview with a gentleman named Dean Rothbart, and he's a Pulitzer Prize nominated retired journalist from the Wall Street Journal. He said, I know what you are. You're a human potential whisperer. And I thought, oh, that's great. I do see people's potential, and I'd like to be one of the small influences on their life that help them get closer to it. I mean, there's debate. Do we ever really reach our potential? Maybe if you get a lot of years and you work really hard in this life, maybe. But I thought that was cool. So I think I was human potential whispering with young David. And then when I was 17, I was like, oh, good, there's a name for this science.
Hi, everyone. We want to take a quick moment to shout out our podcast sponsors. Now, first, you might be wondering who I am, so let me introduce myself. I am Hannah Hanagan, and normally I'm behind the camera as the videographer, but today I wanted to be in front of the camera to shout out the people who made this podcast possible. Barrett McNagny and Sweetwater Sound are the 2 sponsors of our podcast, and they're both located in Northeast Indiana. If you don't already know who they are, let me introduce them to you. We're going to start with Barrett McNagny. As Fort Wayne has grown, the Barrett Law Firm has grown with it. Founded in 1876, Barrett McNagny is one of the oldest law partnerships in Indiana, and it's among one of the largest just in Northeast Indiana. They have the breadth of experience across a wide range of practice areas to provide you trusted legal counsel where and when you need it. And Sweetwater is actually the one we were able to purchase most of our audio and video gear from to make this podcast. So if you like how this podcast sounds or how it looks, be sure to check them out. Sweetwater, the nation's largest, and I would also add friendliest destination for music gear, is also your one-stop shop for all things podcasting. From audio interfaces, recording software, mixers, microphones, cameras, and lighting, Sweetwater has everything to get your podcast up and running. Enjoy personalized gear advice from their dedicated team of sales engineers, as well as free technical support to get your podcast connected and up and running. Really, what's not to love about that? So whether you already have a following or you're still chasing the next big thing, Sweetwater is going to be the ones to help you create a podcast that everyone will be talking about. So if you're interested in either of these companies, be sure to check out the links in our description. Now, let's get back to the podcast. Moving on, I guess we've kind of talked about your childhood and kind of where you came from and how you got to where you are. And we've talked about your book, and maybe somewhere in the middle, tell us the story behind Gladieux Consulting. How did you know that was like the right move at the right time?
I had always, right out of graduate school, I started working immediately in corporate human resources and training. So I was a corporate HR director for robotics. I was in construction, in warehousing, and always taking my vacation time to design seminars in communication topics for continuing studies, like at Purdue Fort Wayne, for those kind of audiences. And I approached my employer in the year 2000 and said, I'm going to start a company, and I'm going to call it Gladieux Consulting, and I'm going to do training on my free time. It won't impact my performance. And they said, great. Actually, that particular company said, we all own other companies too. Cool. I was the only woman in senior management at that company, and I stayed for 4 years. And then in 2004, using all of my personal, not all of my personal time, a lot of my personal time and vacation time and nights and weekends to develop training seminars and present them, created situations where people were coming up after the seminar to say, yes, I want this for my company. Yes, I want this for my shift supervisors. And I was also always teaching college from age 23 on. So those 6 to 10 p.m., like work 8 to 5 and then go teach 6 to 10. Trine University was the first place to hire me, then Purdue Fort Wayne, and then Indiana Tech. Those students, once grades were in, sometimes they would ask during the semester, and I'd be like, we cannot speak about these things. Come back after you get your grade. And then they would come say, I really like that organizational leadership and supervision class. Can you design something for my company? So I was saying yes to that. And then I thought, I think I might be at that place where I could give it a go. And that was an interesting decision. My heart said, yes, do it. And I listened to my heart. I had some friends that were saying, are you out of your mind? Like, you have a good salary, quarterly bonuses, car reimbursement, insurance. These were the main things that I was giving up in 2004, 20 years ago, almost to this month, 20 years ago. So, but I thought, if it doesn't work out, I will get my resume together and apply to be a corporate HR and training director or VP or something somewhere. Yeah. But I really like the idea of not working for one company, but working for all these different industries. And so that's how that got started. And I named the company name is to honor Mom and Dad Glad, Rosemary and Adrian Gladieux, who raised me to believe that communication is important, how we treat others is important, education is something no one can ever take from you. I named the company after them. I think it is hard to spell as a French last name, but I think it also keeps me and my team very honest because my name is on it.
Yeah.
And that means it has to be really good. Because you want good word of mouth.
For sure.
Northeast Indiana has created word of mouth that has allowed us to accept national clients. And now, for example, this month I'm designing training for Big D Construction. They're a $4 billion construction company and based out of Utah. And we get to work with all these different types of industries, always proudly representing Northeast Indiana, where I learned everything that I needed to know.
Okay, kind of going back to what you said, you just rushed over it so quickly as if it wasn't a huge deal. At least to me, it's a huge deal, as a young 20-something myself. But the fact, you mentioned in our intro call, too, that you were teaching, like, multiple college-level classes in your 20s. And I am only 23 right now, and I cannot imagine, like, stepping in front of, like, a whole class of college students, probably people that are older than me or my same age. Curious about your experience being so young and teaching in that capacity.
You mentioned imposter syndrome. I have it every day. You had asked me earlier Did you have it while writing the book at any point? And I thought I had it for 4 years every day that I sat down to write.
Every single day.
And then I introduce a second voice to debate the first voice, because that first voice is often not helpful and not true. Now, sometimes you might get down on yourself or be hard on yourself about something you could have done better. And I say good. Sometimes give yourself a kick in the pants. You might need it. But a lot of times that first voice that's going to be so critical or unkind is informed by family dynamics, people who were not able to give praise, people who were jealous or upset by your pending success or already earned success, by societal labels, by media, by on and on and on, right? Bias that is conscious, bias that's unconscious. So I take a look at the imposter syndrome or the negative self-talk, and then I think to myself, let's play a game. And the game is, can I introduce a second voice that has any factual information to debate or negate the negative self-talk? And if so, then I spend more time thinking about that. And that helped me a lot as a 23-year-old adjunct professor, because I had earned the Master's of Science from Purdue University, West Lafayette. And I had just completed my thesis. And I, as part of my thesis, was training in factories where people saw me walk in and thought, whatever, she's the assistant, right? And I knew that I just reminded myself of everything I had done in my life that led up to that moment where I'm going to give it 110%. And I'm going to teach to the top of my ability. And I know I have things to learn because I'm 23. But if you were to go teach a college class, let's say next week, let's say I don't teach college these days, but let's say I did. I would love to have you in as a guest instructor, both of you. And I would say, here's the chapter or the chapters we're covering. What do you feel comfortable with? What can you research and learn more about? Bring us some recent research that's statistically valid and possibly useful to these folks' lives or career trajectories. And then how might you engage the audience or the learners, the college students? How are you going to get them talking? Why don't you pick a couple questions? All right, we could role play if you want. Let's go. And I have had undergrad and graduate students come in and co-teach. My team members come in and co-teach. And some of them are shocked and say, before joining Gladieux Consulting, I would never have thought I would be co-presenting with you here. And I'm so proud of them. And they kill it. And what they get from me is a full page of notes. And it's 75%, here's what you did well, and 25% to think about for next time. And it could be little things like, with one team member, I said, you did so well, but you kept backing away. Move towards would be ideal. Little things like that you don't think about when you're presenting. So you're absolutely qualified to go teach and present. Be prepared, right? And for myself, that positive self-talk helped, but I have to always work on the negative self-talk. And they were all pretty much all older than me. That's true. But should age really matter if we have something to learn?
And I want to mention one thing really quick, just about specifically like speaking in public or, sharing your voice. I think there was something in this book that was stood out to me the most, and maybe it's just because I need that right now.
Okay.
And I'm going to read the quote real quick. It says, something that helps me relax is the belief that no human is more valuable than another. And I think that just levels the playing field and helps you kind of have faith in yourself and in the audience. So I was just going to ask you where that belief came from. Where did you find that?
Oh my goodness. I think upbringing. I think between the ages of 2 and 10, we're taught a lot about how we are going to manage conflict. So I think I watched hard communications go down and had a very especially intuitive mom who said things to me like, I know you heard your dad and I fight a lot last night, but I want you to know there's no one I'd rather fight with. And we still love each other, but we're going to fight this out. We're going to argue this out. So I don't know. Maybe the Gladieux French thing. There's high tempers. There's a lot of emotion. Maybe I'm stereotyping myself as coming from that upbringing. I had to learn it early on, right?
Yeah.
That has to, or if we didn't have the opportunity to learn it early on, that's the great thing about every age that we get to live another year. You wake up on the wake-up list, and that's a gift. You can begin to reset your priorities and values and investigate what you've been taught, and then kick to the curb what you've been taught that's not helpful or not true. Play the second voice game. And each chapter in the book has a little exercise like that at the end of each chapter to try to, maybe the person's not going to contact a coach or attend any of our trainings. There's a guide there. Another reason I felt like I had to write the book.
Yeah.
there was a part, very beginning of chapter 4, we're talking about hidden challenge number 1, hiding from risk. When I was reading this part here, it was really stirring something in me, and I was like, oh, I think that I can really relate to this, and a lot of this book, guys, is very, very relatable, and it feels very digestible. It doesn't feel like a big, scary corporate book that I won't understand. So I'm just going to read this little portion. Hiding is thinking you might be a bad person, be wrong, or that things might not work out if you try. So you avoid facing some communications and may just plain avoid being seen. Whether you are tired of the uphill climb, are frightened by the prospect of trying and failing, hate to see a weakness come to light, have a lot on the line, are an expert at avoiding embarrassment, or tell yourself it's not worth the time. I get it, and I'm not here to judge. Instead, I bear an important message. When you take an opportunity to demonstrate courage in communication, you become a role model to others. This is true regardless of your age or station in life. It's true regardless of what is in your past or what is in your head as self-talk. The key is to welcome and moderate insecurity so you can take baby steps daily toward your mission and goals as a communicator. And so this was a portion that I had like pre-selected, and a lot of the questions that we had already come with weren't necessarily going in this direction, but it was just like really cool that we were all talking about the same things that I was like reading and saying, oh my goodness, this is me. Because I feel all the time that there's some things that will come up in my brain or things that I go through, or, you know, people that I interact with, like friends that are going through a situation, and I feel like I might have something to say on the topic. Like I feel like I have some insight or something that I think might be helpful for them because I've been through it, but sometimes I almost scare myself out of it and I go into a hiding mode, and I'm like, well, what I have to say couldn't be like that beneficial for them to hear. But the book, it very clearly states this is
I'm talking to you. Yeah, and I slipped in age to talk to you.
Yes, you're speaking to me.
Well, that means the world to me that you take that away. I want to mention that you can both set a goal related to being more courageous in communication, and then when you have a friend and you're learning about a situation they're in and you think, I think I have something to add here, but I don't want to be too nosy or make it sound like I'm judging, just say, like, give me the first name of the friend. We're not going to talk about whatever the issue is, but what's the first name of that particular friend? Or a friend that this could be.
Oh, it could be, let's say Hadley.
Okay, so it could be Hadley. You could say, Hadley, I have a goal to be more courageous as a communicator. This year, that's my theme for my personal growth. Do you mind if I share something with you? I don't want to overstep a line here, and you don't have to use it, but I'm trying to grow and be more courageous. Could I try it with you? And I think Hadley's walls will go, whoop. Not that she's got a lot of walls, but any human would say, oh, okay, this is about you working on you. Lay it on me. Mm-hmm.
It's all about the framing.
It's all about the framing.
And the intention.
Mm-hmm.
And your intention, state your intention.
Yeah.
I think of like Malala Yousafzai, and she advocated, she's a Nobel Prize winning, and as a young girl, she advocated for education for girls in her country and ended up, of course, being attacked by a gunman, et cetera, and continued to advocate and win the Nobel Prize because she felt so strongly that boys and girls deserve to get on the school bus and go to school. Age doesn't have much to do with it. People who are younger and people who are older often get sidelined, and that's why we need to find our courage and try to forget about the cover of the book that is so irrelevant to what is in your heart and soul and mind.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the nature of life, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. One thing that I did want to add specifically to what you were saying, Callie, about just hiding from risk and maybe communicating and being like, oh, I don't know if this is my place to add. And I just want to share this story just because I think it was one of the most like impactful pieces of advice that I've ever been given. So I went on a school trip in college to India with a professor and his wife. They kind of led this trip, and the professor was our philosophy professor. Great guy, learned so much from him. But there was a specific instance while we were in India, and we had a lot of group discussions about the things that we were learning in the book that we were reading at the time. And I had some one-on-one time with him on one of the train rides that we had. And so we were just talking. I was bringing up a lot of questions that I had about the specific conversations we had been having and about the things we were learning. And he was just like, why haven't you discussed any of this in our group? Like, why, when we have questions and people are bringing things up, why haven't you said anything? And I was like, well, I just didn't know if anyone else was thinking that, or I didn't know if what I would say would add to the conversation. And he just looked at me in like, with 100% like concern and seriousness, he's like, I need an apology from you. And I was like, what? And he was like, also, you're going to have to apologize to the whole group. And it like took me so off guard. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, what am I apologizing for? He's like, well, you just like took away an opportunity for everyone to learn from what you were thinking and feeling and like, you know, discussing. And that just like completely shifted the way that I like perceived what I had to offer into a conversation. So him just being like, you actually did a disservice to these people by not saying that, has completely like flipped my brain on that. But I just wanted to tell that story because I feel like that.
Well, that was a pro move. I like this dude's style
Yes.
as a coach. That was a pro move because he saw you. He cared enough
Yes.
about you to see you fully. And what he saw was your huge heart.
Yeah.
And he knew he would make an emotional impact
Yes.
if he went to, since you're so quick to go to here's how you've messed up, and that's keeping you from using your voice, he went to here's how you've messed up, and you
Yes.
owe us an apology, which resonated with everything in you
Yeah, it's
because
like
you're
that-
so ready
that's
to
what
apologize.
I was trying not to do. Anyone ever asked me, like, what is like the best piece of advice that you've ever been given? Like, that was 100% it. I think about it like daily, if not weekly, in like, work situations, relationship situations.
If there's only one you, and your unique voice is only here for as long as you're here.
Yeah.
And you choose. You're either going to live with regret or live with the scariness of taking risks.
Yep.
Which feels worse?
Yeah. And in that-
I think regret feels pretty
Yes,
terrible.
It did
and
in
I'd
that
rather avoid
moment,
it.
for sure. I'm like, all those discussions I had missed out on. And so,
And he thought so highly of you.
Yeah.
You know that he wanted to really make an impact as a coach.
And he is obviously, as someone who's been my professor in multiple classes, also saw how I wrote too, and it not lining up at all with how I interacted in class. And him, he just really, it was that nudge I needed to be like you need to be speaking and communicating these things. So anyway,
and when you do, the world sees a confident young woman, and then they believe that young women can be confident leaders.
Yeah.
So you're not just doing it for you.
Yeah, that's
You're doing
so
it
true.
for a lot of other people.
Yeah.
I had to step up and take the chance of being a young prof and starting my college teaching career when I did. And then I opened the door to have other people who are younger than I was and less experienced through the years come in and teach because it was my classroom and I could. Because I took the risk initially. So if you are more altruistic, then it's useful to be brave because you can help others.
Yeah. So before we get into our rapid fire wrap-up questions, let our audience know kind of if they're interested in your services or in your book, how can they kind of find those resources?
Sure. Well, the book is available everywhere books are sold. So that's kind of nice.
Yeah, easy.
Yes, it's easy. And our services, I recommend giving me a call. I'm at 260-450-4202. It's my cell phone number. Our tagline at the company is 8 days a week. And so I'm happy to talk nights, weekends, whenever. Yeah. At our website, GladioConsulting.com, we have a ton of free professional and personal development resources. And we really started writing those and loading those in during the pandemic. And I'm very proud of the collection of free resources that are there. Coach's Corner articles are fun to look at because they're real life Q&A. Somebody asks a question and I write back in 2 or 3 paragraphs to the best of my ability, trying to be helpful. And we can sign up. We take sign-ups on the website for our quarterly newsletter called Breakdown, named after one of my favorite Tom Petty songs. And I put a lot of heart and soul into that as well, and always a music video because something that I love is live music, and I love to play a little bass. I love to sing, and I'm a rock and roll girl, so all kinds of music really, but the Breakdown newsletter is fun to subscribe to, and this will probably be linked in once you're done editing, etc. So
Yep. All of those links will be in the description. So last question, really quick. I kind of want to add 2 parts to it, even though I don't have it written down here. What does success look like to you? We've been asking our guests this more recently because one of our hosts had brought that up, and we're like, that is just such a great question. And so it can look like 2 things, like what did success look like to you maybe earlier on in your career, and what have you learned and how's that shifted now?
Okay. I don't know that it's changed that much. I think success is about lifelong learning. I think it matters very much to keep your eye out for who you can lift up and to accept feedback and take what you can use from it and continue to hone your skills. I think more, so you're right, now that I'm thinking about it, I think as I get older, work-life balance is becoming more important because it's tougher for me to run around the country managing the schedule that I used to manage, tougher on the body, tougher on the mind. So now I make a concerted effort to try to forget what I do for a living at some point every day or every night. So I might be in my garden, I might be at a singing lesson, I might be playing poker online, or just anything so that I can not be who I am when I am in my world of work and try to disassociate a bit, because I think in the Western culture especially, we tend to think about our value as what we do. And as we've discussed here today, every human being is so much more than that at the soul level. So I want to try to continue to pursue life-work balance because I'm pretty addicted to this work.
Yeah.
I think workaholism is real.
Yeah.
But I mean, can you see why?
Yeah, you're passionate about it. When that lines up with your career.
I'm going to get to see what happens as you two go out and present and lead, and I'm addicted to that for sure. Okay,
it's time for our rapid wrap-up questions. This is a fun little segment. We've got some either-or questions, some what's your favorite questions. One that I'm going to throw in there now that I wasn't planning on because I just learned something new about you is do you have like a favorite live music event that you've been to? Ever.
Oh my goodness.
Like number one.
Yes. Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, 2017, their 40th anniversary world tour. He did it for the fans. They did it for the fans. He wasn't feeling too great. It was as spiritual as any church service I've ever been to. Saw them in Michigan, and he lived a few months after that. Tom Petty then passed away, so I was very grateful I invested in those tickets and that I invested in seeing him 4 times in my life.
Yeah.
But really, any music venue that has a good rockin' band that is cohesive and tight, that kind of communication also really excites me.
Yeah.
I don't know if you attend a lot of the festivals around here, but if you had to choose between the Three Rivers Festival or the Johnny Appleseed Festival, which one would you choose?
They both have great food. They both have great volunteers. They both have live music, but I would probably lean towards Three Rivers because that's where I could probably catch a rock band.
Yeah. They have a lot of different music options.
So what is your favorite hat to wear, maybe, in your career? So writing, speaking, or coaching? Like, which would be your favorite?
I need all 3 because I am not a person who can do just one thing and feel fulfilled. I would just add a 4th, research. And adding to my team with research associates has been really helpful because it's pretty fun to say, I have clients and myself, we want to learn how to gain patience or gain prowess as a communicator in this aspect. Can you go find recent academic research about that? And we can also do some of our own. So I love all 4 things equally. And I think that the variety helps keep me feeling like it's new all the time.
When you travel for work, what is your favorite part about coming home?
I am always really happy to see the Fort Wayne Airport because I have traveled extensively and very, very few do it as well, the customer service as well as our Fort Wayne Airport, and we are proud advertisers there as well. And you know what? You get your luggage really, really fast. So I can get to my car, maybe getting in my car and turning up the radio and just going, I gave my best and now I can relax and read the engagement summary, basically read the training participant thoughts and see what they said and see how we can celebrate success, try to get better. So coming home to the airport's pretty cool.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for being on our podcast.
My pleasure. I'm really proud of you both. I really am. You're stepping up.
We appreciate it. Just as a reminder, we have all of Michelle's information linked in the description below. So she gave her phone number on the podcast. Give her a call. Thank you guys so much for joining us on this episode, and we'll see you guys in the next one.